welcome everybody to the Performance and Animal Rights Roundtable. This is an initiative by Bright Eyes Theatre Arts to bring creatives and activists together to talk about the role of performance in the animal rights movement. A brand new UK theatre company, Bright Eyes Theatre Arts, is dedicated to centering the non-human animal narrative through performance, tours, theatre and education, training and research. My name is Leigh Venus. I've been involved in animal rights work since 2018 as an activist, organiser and writer, and I've spent over a decade working in culture and heritage. I was described in the event description for tonight as a cultural commentator, which is a first for me, but I'm going to take it. And I've been given the gorgeous task of facilitating the conversation tonight, and I really can't wait to hear from everyone on the panel. So joining us tonight, we have Ben Hunt, performance artist, academic, founder of Bright Eyes Theatre Arts, and host of the Performing Animal Rights Archive and Podcasts. A practice-based researcher, Ben's work probes performance as a tool in bringing about positive change in social justice movements. Barbara Helen is an artist and activist whose songs are inspired by living a vegan lifestyle and being involved with animal rights activism. Barbara has released 2 albums and can often be found performing at vegan festivals and animal rights events. Harley McEckersal is a social change organiser and co-founder of the organisation Young Voices for Animals. Moving to the UK from Australia to work on narrative and strategy at Animal Rebellion, Harley uses her background in art and theatre to contribute to the development of a powerful movement for animals. Jen Armstrong is an artist who breathes freedom, love and compassion out to all beings via powerful songs of truth via her alter ego, Vegan Queen V. Inspiring people to make more compassionate and mindful choices, her debut album, Freedom Warrior, was released earlier this year. And last, but by no means least, fresh from an art walk and a mini concert in Newcastle this weekend, Daniel Hellman is an award-winning singer, performer, dancer and theatre maker. With his alter ego Sawyer, a sex-positive feminist vegan drag cow, he has created a one-cow show, released an album, and travelled across the US with the solo exhibition Planet Moo. So we've got 2 hours to spend in the company of this fantastic panel, and I'm excited to hear from everyone here tonight. Those of you in the audience, if you could just please keep your mics on mute and your video off throughout the panel so we can focus on our guests. We are going to be taking questions at the end, so if anything comes to mind that you want to put to the panel, just drop it in the chat throughout the event, and we're going to be putting those to the people here later on tonight. Okay, so let's get into it then. Thanks very much to all of our panelists for coming together tonight. I've got a bunch of questions that I'm going to direct at you individually, but for each of them, I, and I'm sure our audience too, would love to hear all of your thoughts. So please chime in and we'll get the conversation going. So Ben, as the founder of Bright Eyes Theatre, I'm going to kick off with you, since you're the person who's brought us all here tonight. How did you get started in animal rights activism? Where did you come from, and where are you now?
Thanks, Lee. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for hosting this. I really appreciate your time and your questions to come. It's exciting. So my name is Ben. I am a 33-year-old white man with brown hair, wearing a green shirt with a button a bit too tight around my neck, but I don't want to loosen it up just yet, maybe a bit later. My pronouns are he, him. The question of getting into animal rights activism is quite a basic one, I think. I turned vegan because I read something in a book, and then I went to the Animal Rights March in London and heard a speech by the very famous in the vegan circles, Earthling Ed, talking about would you walk past a dog being kicked? And I was like, no. And then that decides that I'm going to be an activist. So I got into the circles of Anonymous the Voices and vegan outreach. And then more and more doing more stuff, and eventually opening a little micro sanctuary in the pandemic, just absorbed a lot of animals in need. Yeah, so where am I now? I'm just at the tail end of my PhD, looking at performing arts in animal rights activism, specifically looking at trauma and how trauma is explored through performance, but also lots of other things. And I just come off the back of a performance last week on a treadmill for 6 hours, looking at the anti-hunt movement. Yeah, so now, and I've kindly got my supervisors in tonight, they'll know that I'm hopefully eventually near the end. I can see it in the horizon. But yeah, so that's me.
Very good. Thanks, Ben. Go on, we'll kick it over to our other panelists. And so, Barbara.
Hi, I'm Barbara Helen. I'm an animal rights activist and singer-songwriter. Been vegan for about 10 years. Yeah, I was vegetarian, and I think it was really pre-social media. And through so I found out through a mainstream TV program about the dairy industry and about the male calves getting shot as a waste byproduct of the dairy industry. And it was a shock to me. I wasn't just unaware of that as a vegetarian, and I vowed for those calves that I saw being shot that was it. I was vegan, and that was like, oh, yippee, I'm vegan. You know, the world's going to be a better place. And then you realise that you're opening a door to a whole new world, and a whole roller coaster of emotions, almost like going through a grief process. And I think I've been through pretty much them all and keep revisiting them, getting angry and get down about things, but try and remain positive at the end of it. But yeah, so yeah, I've always written songs, and my songs have always been personal, and I play guitar and record my songs. And it's a way of expressing myself. So the feelings that have come up through being vegan and through being active with the Animal Save movement, all pour out in the songs. And that's, I suppose that's my way of expressing myself. And to describe myself, I'm a white female. I've got white hair. I'm 67, and I'm wearing a green Eco Threads top, which I love.
Thanks, Barbara. Jen, shall we go to you next? How did you get started, and what's happening with you now? You're marooned up in Scotland somewhere, I believe.
yeah, but grateful for the marooning anyway. Yeah, hello everybody. It's an absolute delight to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Yeah, my story is very similar to Barbara's. I was vegetarian, and then I watched Cowspiracy and Forks Over Knives, Earthlings. They're sort of the three big documentaries that I think changed a lot of vegetarians to vegans, because you're showing the truth surrounding the dairy industry and the egg industry. And yeah, it was a massive shock to me. I'd been vegetarian since I was 8 years old, because I just had this affinity with animals and just didn't understand why we would say that we love something and then kill them unnecessarily. So I found that very early on, but it took me till 6 years ago to find veganism. And like many vegans, I wish I just found it sooner. But I'm here now, and I'm a professional musician and have been my whole adult life. So naturally, I just started, once I found out about these industries and what these animals are going through, and naturally started writing songs for them and from their perspective, trying to show the world what was happening from their eyes as well. And like Barbara said as well, I've realised that those songs, as well as trying to share the truth, they were actually my therapy to get through this traumatic experience of not only realising that you've been completely blind to such a massive, horrific truth most of your life, but once you actually take that to your friends and your family, you expect them to have the same reaction as you, and oh my goodness, I had no idea. But actually the opposite happens, and often you're called the crazy one, or oversensitive, or all those words that we know that we're not. We know we're innately supposed to be here to look after the animals, and they are our friends. That's why when we're kids, we have this affinity with animals. So yeah, songwriting has been a big, massive thing for me. in dealing with the trauma that comes with veganism. And there's Claire Mann says, you know, living in this non-vegan world, it's quite traumatic. So yeah, that's me. And I'm on the Isle of Lewis, so I'm in a pretty cozy outfit today. We've been on the beach, so I've got a nice woolly, not woolly, no, it's not wool. It's I don't know, some sort of acrylic material, and my jogging bottoms on. Just feeling comfy and happy to be here. So thank you. That's me.
Thanks, Jen. That's powerful stuff. I'm sure we're going to get into the dealing with trauma and how, you know, performance can deal with that. Just jumping to the other side of the world now, we'll go to Harley, who I believe it's around 4 or 5 a.m. where you are.
Yeah, it's 20:04. I'm trying to pretend that's not real. Yeah, I'm in Australia. Hi, I'm Harley. I'm a 25-year-old white female. Hello. With, I guess. Thank you. Cool. Yes, 25-year-old white female. Dark blonde hair. I'm resisting calling myself a brunette. I've been fighting that for a few years now. And yeah, pronouns are she, her. Yeah, I feel like, so my kind of journey into animal activism is very interlinked with my kind of, I guess, theatrical history. So I wasn't aware or active in any way for a very long time. I grew up in the country, rural Australia, dairy farming country. My dad was a milker, kind of all that stuff. Just very much, I guess, accepted the status quo of how we use animals as being just normal, no question. It was only when I went to university studying theatre, so I was at a university in Melbourne, and yeah, I was studying theatre. I was kind of like exploring that side of myself, and I kind of stumbled into animal rights through first year philosophy, of all the places, and just, I guess, made this connection in my mind that there's just no morally justifiable reason to exploit animals or to use them in any way. And I was always very big on, at that point in my life, I was a lot more focused on like consistency. I didn't like the idea of being like morally inconsistent. So that was kind of my big turning point. So I think at that time, I kind of felt like there was this like duality in my head. It was like, well, I'm studying this theatre degree, but now all my time is going into animal activism. Yeah, I co-founded an organization, Young Voices for Animals, which they mentioned, which ran for a couple of years with other people, and then was also starting to get involved in different activist groups around Melbourne. So yeah, a lot of my time and energy was going to that, while also trying to do theatre. So I think I very much separated them in my mind, like, oh well, at some point I'm going to have to choose. And I very distinctly remember a car ride with a friend of mine, where we were talking about activism. He was a big influence for me, and I kind of just looked at him and I was like, my life's not going to be how I thought it's going to be, is it? Just realizing that this pathway I saw for myself with the degree I was doing, where I imagined that ending up, was just radically changed in a matter of a few weeks. And he was like, yeah, probably not. So yes, I very much saw them as separate. And then it was only when I guess I started to become more interested in like social movements and like social change on like a wider level, that I started to see this like correlation between I often think about myself like a lot of the time I don't feel like I'm actively performing. Like I wouldn't even say I'm a performer anymore, in the sense that I'm not creating work, I'm not kind of putting any work out there, but I very much think of myself as having an artist's brain. I see the world through that lens, and when I started kind of studying social movements, it just, everything clicked in my head of that. This is the same kind of force in the universe. This is the same kind of like cultural initiative when you're creating some kind of artistic work, and when you're trying to create social change. Essentially what you're doing is you're looking for entry points into culture and trying to like break the status quo and trying to kind of like, well, yeah, essentially break into people's consciousness in some way, like get their attention in some way, kind of shift even just subtly how they're seeing the world. Like it just felt the same. So that really influenced my work moving forward. And yeah, as I said, I moved to the UK in 2020, and I worked with Animal Rebellion. So they're a group who like kind of inspired by like mass movement theories of organizing. So we use very much like arts and performance to create these big disruptive actions, which are more performance than anything else. So I was very much involved in a bunch of actions targeting McDonald's, which were just giant open air theatre performances, I would say. And we spent more time working on props than probably anything else. And then, yeah, I've recently moved back to Australia, and I'm kind of trying to bring that work here to a very, I will say, depleted animal rights movement post-COVID. So yeah, trying to bring some of those ideas and that energy back to the movement back home, which has been interesting. So that's kind of where I'm at now. Yeah.
Well, it's a hell of a journey, Harley. Thanks for that. And thanks for being up right now. Really appreciate it. All right, so Dan, I'm going to go to you. So you hail from Zurich, but I believe you're in England right now.
Yes, hi everybody. My name is Daniel. Maybe some of you know me as Soya the cow. This is my alter ego. I'm 37 with a denim shirt and some not really well removed eye makeup around my face because I was dressed up as a drag cow 2 days ago. Yeah, so for me, my path came also from the arts, where I was dealing with other topics, mostly with questions about like queerness and sexual freedom or sex worker rights. And through these kind of topics, yeah, it expanded, like the question, who has the right to control the sexuality of somebody else or the body of somebody else? At some point, I just realized, wait, what about non-human animals? Why do we apply principles like consent only to humans? And once I made this shift, well, my whole world shifted. I became vegan, and I made the first play about meat, which was like a requiem for all the animals without a name. And it was no success at all. We were censored in 2 theaters. I also felt like I got lost in references, and I was scared of the reactions of the audience. I was scared to be too radical. At the same time, I couldn't even convince my own team about my own conviction. So it was, yeah, there was something very difficult about it. And after that experience, I had the desire to kind of be much more free and radical in the way I stand for other animals. And I found inspiration in drag artists who were defending, yeah, like queer rights or trans rights, or like in an intersectional way with a lot of like, yeah, a lot of body power, let's say. I got inspired and I was like, wow, I need the same kind of fierce, fearless attitude to speak about veganism. And so the idea was born to become a drag cow. That has been 4 years now. In the beginning was a bit part-time, we had COVID, and I would say now she's like my main activity. She took over my closet, my life, my mental health. So yeah, the cow, she's very present. And I try to bring her to all different contexts. Like now it was an art walk, I did exhibitions, an album, a lot of time in art context. So I try to really go there because the voice for other animals is not so much present. But I have also performed in context of protests with and for animal rights activists.
Oh, thanks, Dan. I love how Sawyer's consuming your life. I think there's something interesting there about what performance can do to an activist. I love the thought of her taking over your wardrobe, especially. Well, leads us on really neatly to the idea of what does performance mean in the context of animal rights. And Barbara, I just want to come to you first on this, but interested in hearing from all of you. You've been hailed by the co-founder of the Animal Saved movement as the Woody Guthrie that we need for animal rights. So it's a hell of a lot of praise. But what does performance mean to you personally in your work, in your activism, in the context of animal rights?
On a personal level, it keeps me sane because it's a way of expressing my feelings. I'm fortunate to have that outlet because I'm sure a lot of people struggle. Anybody who's involved in the animal rights movement, sort of, we need to talk to each other about how we feel, because I'm sure a lot of us struggle with our emotions, the roller coaster of emotions that we do feel. And very often when we're stood together doing any form of activism, you feel safe and you feel part of something, and you can see who you're doing it for, the animals. But it's maybe on the journey home that you sort of almost like post-traumatic stress, that's not too light a word for it, because it really is. It isn't normal to sort of look into the eyes of animals who are heading to slaughter, or to see the footage that is being displayed if you're standing on the streets sharing footage, and sharing the noises as well, the screams of the animals, and hearing the screams of the animals. So that's not a normal thing for people to put themselves up for without any sort of support or backup. So on a personal level, for me, I feel fortunate that I have a creative outlet, that I'm able to write my songs about how I'm feeling, what I'm observing, what I'm seeing, what I'm sharing. And for the animals, it's all for the animals, and that keeps me pretty much sane on one personal level. On another level, I think it's really good to be able to share that outlet, a creative outlet, to share my songs for people who perhaps haven't thought about animals in the way that animal rights activists do. And when you become vegan, the way other people have really well described, sort of the journey to becoming vegan. It's and you quite vividly remember all those little light bulb moments, and so I'm hoping to sort of perhaps make light bulb moments go off for other people. And I mean, one instance that strikes, that I remember quite well, is that I was performing at it wasn't a vegan event. It was sort of like an event where there was sort of quite a few vegan tables and things, and people sort of giving out leaflets, and I was performing my songs. And a woman came over to me and she said, "Oh, your song, Just Like Us." She said, I've been sort of working on my stall and sat sort of next to this animal rights stall and looking at the leaflets, and they just sort of didn't really click with me. But when I heard the song about animals being just like us, she said it really touched me, and that sort of thing really makes my day, makes me feel fantastic, because that's what I hope to do, to plant seeds, to keep myself sane, to express how other people are feeling, because a lot of activists who I stand with the Save movement, when I wrote my song I Saw You, after one of the Save events, it reduced other activists to tears, because it was yes, this is how I feel, this I can identify with this. So I can't really remember what the question was. I think I've gone off on a bit of a tangent, but it's sort of my outlet is definitely writing the songs, singing the songs. I never get tired of doing it, and every time I sing the songs, I feel the emotion, and I hope to share that with people, set a few light bulb moments going off in their minds if they're not already vegan or haven't already thought about it. And I think music and any form of artivism, which I like to call it, is a fantastic way of doing it.
Yeah, I love the concept of artivism, and it's interesting that you're getting personal meaning from it, but also as a way to deal with your own trauma as well. So for anyone in the rest of the panel, what does performance mean to you personally in the context of the animal rights movement that we're all engaged in?
Yeah, sort of following again on from what Barbara was saying, because we come from a very similar place, and what we're trying to do is, kind of in line with each other, I think. The performance, it just mental health wise, not only, singing or performing of any sort of kind, physically, it's good for you, it's good for your bodies, but it's good for your mind. On top of that, you actually feel like you're doing something about the situation. You're dealing with your own trauma around it, but you're also helping to spread the truth. And I believe that in my case, music is how I perform. It's a really beautiful language that everyone understands. And if you can put your message in music, I feel like it can be understood and sort of received a little better than if you were just speaking to somebody about it, or, I think they can hear it a little better through music.
Dan, coming from a completely different perspective, non-musical based, what's your take on this? What does performance mean to you in the context of your broader activism?
Yeah, so I mean, I also use music for part of it. So I resonate a lot with what Barbara and Jen were saying just before. But at the same time, for me, there is maybe also like a very strategic element where I'm like, how can I, through the performance, fill like a void or a gap that or difficulties we have? First of all, is like the concerned animals will not be able in most of the times to join our protests. Or like we have like a problem of like transmitting, is that a correct word, or translating, maybe just translating their suffering and their lives or their needs into other people's brains. So there's a and of course also the land and countryside and city gap, like people in like are consuming in supermarkets and restaurants animal bodies, but they are very distant from the actual animals. And so for me, like the take to create this alter ego who is a cow, it allows somehow to bridge some of these. I can claim to speak from a perspective of a cow. Of course, everybody understands that I'm not. And at the same time, I also feel that like we can use performance to disrupt, to create like something which is, like taking people out of their ordinary habits. And in this opening of the disruption, I think like interesting processes can happen. And this can be like a big animal rebellion staged protest performance, but it can also just be a song. I think once we get this attention and the openness, like that's the interesting place. And for me, the strategy with the character of Soya is also to just get the attention. Because basically when I have all this makeup and costumes and horns and latex others, I don't know, people will listen differently when otherwise they would just walk away and be like, oh, another activist annoying me. And they're like, who is that? What is this? And it's a lot of work every time, for example. It's really like the makeup, the process. And it's sometimes I have this desire, I wish I could do something much more simple, but I feel like it pays off because it creates this curiosity, even in people who otherwise would not have this opening.
It's interesting that that idea of disruption and theatricality and how that can really have an impact on people on the outside of this looking in. Harley, you talked about your background in art and theatre, and you bring that to your work and developing a powerful movement for animals that draws and learns from the dynamic and creative potential of performance. From your perspective, how can performance and disruptive narrative enhance the messaging for the movement?
like I said earlier, I see performance and disruption as being very linked, because I think a lot of the time performance and art is some kind of disruption. Like it's breaking people out of the normal everyday routine of their lives in order to get them to look at something or listen to something or connect with something. Like I feel like even just the act of consuming a lot of art is kind of inherently disruptive a lot of the time. Like, you know, you go to the theater or you go to an art gallery, you open a book, even listening to music, even though I feel like that can be a more passive kind of thing, it's in some way breaking into your brain. So I see that as being kind of like the way we view art and the way kind of art impacts us, I see as being very kind of linked to disruption. So when I think about like disruptive protest, which is kind of what I've been involved with, the idea of breaking the status quo and disrupting normalcy, I feel that's very linked to my ideas of art and how art has this like radical potential for social change. And I guess like one way I kind of think about it is just like people can't know what an alternative world could be like until you show it to them. And I feel like a big issue in our movement is just the impossibility of imagining change. And I feel this both from the outside when you're trying to communicate with people, but also sometimes from the inside as well, when you're talking to people in the movement. And, you know, I remember a friend of mine did a presentation once, which was about hope in the animal rights movement, and recognizing that there's a severe deficit of hope, and that a lot of activists haven't even really developed their own vision of what's the word that we want. Like, we want these industries to stop, but what do we want? Like, what do we want the world to look like? And a lot of that's linked to trauma, of just that, people have already touched on. People are living in this traumatized state of being exposed to just unimaginable violence and suffering, often on a daily basis. And, you know, you can't really see past that. But yeah, I do see performance as being a really kind of powerful tool there, of giving us this opportunity to project and show alternate visions that don't exist right now, or maybe if they do, they exist in kind of like places where people aren't seeing. So for example, like even just when Ben was talking earlier about, you know, having a micro sanctuary, I feel like that's like an alternative vision of social change, which is a very kind of lived reality and important reality, but in its own way is a kind of performance of this idea of turning a home into a sanctuary. I think like the way that we live as activists and as vegans, as people concerned with animal rights, people with trying to radically reimagine the world that we live in, like, I don't know, I guess to not wanting to dive too deep into performativity, but you know, it's all performance in a way. Like we're projecting another view of the world onto the existing view of the world, and using that as a tool to kind of bridge a gap of conscience or of ideology or of morality. So yeah, I see that, I guess, to kind of like sum it up, I think of performance as being inbuilt into activism, and there can be performance activism, like artivism. I love that term, as Barbara says. It can be, you know, making art around themes of animal justice, but there can also just be the acknowledgement that everything that we do as activists is in a way this performance of another universe. And I guess like I always see my goal is making that alternate reality so irresistible that people have no choice but to say yes to it, because really, like, it's just a better world. Like, we can't, and if we can show people that, if we can just create this irresistible future, this irresistible version of reality where, you know, yeah, animals aren't exploited, but it's just this kind of better, more just world, then I think we can really kind of bridge that gap to people of like, well, this is why we're fighting for this.
Just thinking about that, you know, creation of a new vision of reality, you know, Jen, your work's infused with, you know, powerful messages of truth, peace, love, and compassion. You're creating this vision of a kind of a better world through your music as well. What's your perspective on the role performance can have in the movement in terms of affecting change in people?
I think one of the coolest, most powerful things about performance is you are stepping up and you are not only living your truth, but you're sharing it. And I really believe that we need to be the change that for the, you know, for other people. We need to be walking the walk and talking the talk, leading by example, showing you know, how amazing veganism is, and as a performer, you know, actually getting up there, sharing your passion, sharing your creativity in this powerful way, I think it's quite inspiring, for vegans, obviously, for sure, but also for non-vegans, you know. And it speaks a lot for a movement if, you know, people are willing to dedicate their lives or a large part of their lives for the cause. But for me, it's the most important thing I do. You know, stand for freedom for everyone, animals and non-human animals, human animals, everyone. We're all the same. And yeah, I think performance is powerful, and it shows that we're not going anywhere. We're just gonna shout louder.
I like that. We're not going anywhere. It's going to get louder and louder. There's going to be more drag animals in the street. It's going to get worse for you. You need to start paying attention. Ben, I'm thinking about the performance activism you've been involved in, your theatrical side of things, the academic side of things, and the work you've done publicly that's seen you really kind of blurring the boundaries between the human and the animal through kind of quite grueling live performance work. What do you think the boundaries are for humans taking on the responsibility of representing animals?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question to grapple with, I think, and I don't really have an answer in the sense of, I mean, it's been said, I'm sure you've all heard it before, about this is the only movement where we're not having a conversation with a human conversation with the oppressed, and that's interesting. It's interesting in the case of how do we bring the non-human animal into the space, and hear them from the perspective beyond the system that's in place, and performance, I think, plays a really good role in that, whether that's through songs, through performance art, through direct action. But yeah, it's interesting, the representation. How do we not fall into the trap of mirroring societal norms of over sexualization, like of cows in the dairy industry? I just saw an advert for the fridge milkshakes, which I used to love, by the way. I used to go at Asda at like 2 a.m. and get these chocolate fridge milkshakes, and now I look at them and metaphorically spit, and sometimes, no, I don't physically spit on the milkshakes, but they open it and it goes and a really sexy moo, and then it's like put it down. It's like, are you drinking my fridge? And it's just like this complete involvement of the animal, but this kind of complete abstract sexual notion of the animal. But obviously that's not animal rights activism, but there are examples of falling into that trap, which I'm sure if you guys look back and think of it, there are some uncomfortable moments maybe. And sometimes I look back at what I do and I think, well, was that right? How much is it about, how much of the animal am I bringing in, and how much am I forcing thoughts upon a certain animal. So, for example, I did a performance piece a couple of weeks ago or last week, looking at the anti-hunt, and I was on a treadmill dressed as a sab, but there's definitely this notion that I could also be the fox being chased. But I didn't put on a bushy tail. I didn't put on I didn't cosplay a fox, but then I could have. And it'll be interesting to hear Daniel's perspective on this, because obviously he straddles this kind of interspecies space. But I think it's a thing. It'll be interesting to hear what everyone thinks, but I think I grapple with that all the time, especially when I interact with my own non-human animals who I live with. I do funny voices for them, and they're saying stuff, but they're not actually saying it. They're not like, yeah. So it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting space that we occupy, and I wonder if that will change. How would performance look in a vegan world? Would we be doing the same representations of animals we do now in our activism? I don't know.
Something really interesting in there, isn't there, about what responsibility we have as people involved in this movement to define what the new societal norms around this will be as well, and kind of accepting that there's going to be some stumbles and falls along the way that we need to deal with, and being accepting of that, I think, in other activists. But yeah, you pointed out Dan's work there, and Dan, your artistic practice, it exists as this form of intersectional activism, and your work's increasingly focused on the relationships between humans and other animals. So what do you think of Ben's perspective there? And also, how does performance offer you the opportunity to explore the animality in our own species?
Yeah, there's a lot of thoughts for me right now with everything that has been said. So one experience I've had with the theater director recently was I talked to him about Soya. It's a space that does a lot of like anti-racist work, queer work, and he was saying we have this rule: nothing about us without us. So if we don't want to have artists working on a topic where they're not speaking from their own experience, where they're kind of colonizing maybe somebody else's experience, and that it's in that sense a bit a problem if I would do my project there. And I was like, yeah, but this rule, it kind of comes to an end when we talk about non-human topics. Like we have environmental questions, we have the whole animal questions, and like we will not be able to put a tree into this theater space to defend themselves. And so there is something where I feel like we are on a border where we forcibly will do mistakes, and I think we have to do these mistakes, because otherwise we will just not do anything, and not doing anything is not an option. In that sense, I'd much rather have people criticize me for kind of appropriating a cow's perspective, which is definitely not mine. But if I don't do it, then we just don't hear these voices, which are there in these contexts. I think it's different if you visit a place where cows live, but they're not in the art context, or not in the supermarket alive. So for me also, then the character, I think it's interesting to kind of be aware that we are playing. I think that's maybe a central part, that we need maybe a distance and a certain also like irony. For me, like there's something, if we over-identify with the performing the animal or the other animal, I think it can be quite cringy sometimes. I've also been witnessing these kind of performances where I thought, so yeah, it's hard to put into words precisely what it is, but for me, the intersectional part with different, there's different lines, I would say, like I sometimes say Soya is gender and species bending, which sounds a bit like a funny tagline, but I really believe that we need to break up all these binaries of human and animal, of male and female, life and death, nature and culture, and many others, because in the end, these polar thinking has been the root of so much violence and oppression. So yeah, that's what I'm interested in at the moment. And rather than asking what makes us different, we can ask what do we have in common, and there is so much, and that would be this animality for me, and reminding those we interact with, be it activists, audience, slaughterhouse workers, or farm manager, or who knows what, like if we can remind them of this animality somehow through our performances, I think then we have reached a great thing.
Does anybody else have any thoughts on that? 'Cause it's an interesting subject, isn't it, about how we can inadvertently or deliberately appropriate animals in our work. Barbara, what's your thoughts on that? How do you feel about this concept of us taking on the animal's voice without consent and running with it? How do you feel?
What sparked it for me, with what Dan was saying, was that I'm very much a believer in oneness, that we are, that's the goal, oneness. We need to recognize that, that we're all earthlings, and ego gets in the way of a lot of things, and that it's better to speak out than say nothing. My songs are usually from my perspective. I haven't written anything from this perspective of the non-human animal, but it's mainly the way I'm feeling and the way I'm sort of expressing myself about it. But yeah, it's you just got to keep learning and growing and recognizing that we are all animals, we are all earthlings, and everybody has the right to exist, sort of on their own level, really. Not quite sure what else to say, really, apart from that. It just that animals have a voice, we're just not listening most of the time. Yeah.
Well, thinking about your work, Barbara, so going back to this idea of artivism, that is a way to reach out and to, be heard, to offer empathy and support to others who are perhaps sharing the same feelings. Just focusing on your own work, how do you see creativity and performance as an outlet and motivator for activists?
Well, as an outlet, as I said before, it's a way of keeping yourself sort of sane, expressing those emotions, and as a motivator, I think it's great when somebody sort of touches on your wavelength and you can say, yeah, I feel that way too, and it's reaching a part of the soul. I think any form of art or music just reaches a part of your own soul and somebody else's that perhaps just reading something yourself or watching something on a screen doesn't. So I think it's a really good way to move forward, to always have that expression, to be able to share that expression, and for other people to sort of spark that feeling as well, that that recognition about what you're saying. I think very much so. It's a huge part. Yeah.
Jen, I'm just jumping off from what Barbara was saying there. I'm thinking about your kind of journey. You spoke about becoming vegan after learning the truths surrounding the industry and dealing with all of that, emotion that comes with that. And like many people out there, you'll have felt the psychological burden of those truths, like I'm sure we all have. From your perspective, how do you think performance can support individuals, whether activists or not, emotionally?
I do believe that on a personal level, and for people who are the performers, I think that the physical act of getting out what's in your head is incredibly important. That's partly why I see performance as being so important for the performer. Similar to on a similar topic, the performance side, I really believe, goes with other, the other ways of showing up for animal rights. I believe that collaboration is super powerful. So my performance, alongside, say, artwork from somebody, or a video somebody's put together, for animal rights. Yeah, I think that yeah, that's possibly not quite answering the question, but that's what I wanted to say about performance in terms of other activists can work with what I'm doing to create something that we couldn't have done on our own. And often activists will use my songs or animal rights songs that we've written for their street activism work, or to put behind a video that they've made, or a poem or anything like that. And I think, you know, if the intention is there, and you have the same intentions and the same goals, it can be, yeah, powerful and therapeutic for the artists as well, and the animal rights artists and activists.
It's fascinating, that idea of kind of open source activism, isn't it? And that you're happy with your music being used, as long as it's being used with good intentions, it's being used to further the movement.
Yeah.
How do the rest of you in the room feel about that, about people taking your work and reusing it, appropriating it, presumably for the good?
Yeah, I think there can be real value in that. I remember very briefly created this green agents thing. Harley might remember, because I kind of gate crashed one of the actions dressed as a green agent from the future.
I remember the green agents.
Yeah. So we kind of came up and were like, we're from the future, from this department of the government that was invented to make sure there's a just and sustainable plant-based transition. So the government created us, and we were like there to like support the police shutting down the bank. So it kind of twists it on its head. And I think things like that are perfect, because the idea was, it's just me being lazy in a way, and I should still do it, is set up a website with all the resources on and what we did, and just say, there you go, that's what we did, and this is the premise of it, just take it and run with it. And how cool would that be? Kind of just like green agents just popping up and just doing stuff. So I think things like that are really cool. Even things like loads of drag interspecies animals coming out of the woodwork, because I was talking to Daniel about, like, in the UK about the fox, and how cool would it be if there was a drag fox going out sabbing and just like really confusing the hunt, and they're like, they don't know what to do because it's such a macho kind of thing, and it's this sassy fox just in heels in the mud, and there's this kind of template we can use. And I think that's an exciting avenue to explore for sure. From a theatrical point of view, I think the songs that Barbara and Jen write are just such incredible anthems anyway in their own right, to just be played anywhere, and such like a communal kind of, you can sing along to them, and they play such a vital role in mobilizing. And then there's this kind of spectrum of performance where we can replicate or be moved to take action. So I think definitely that there should be more of it. But again, I said that and I haven't done what I said I was going to do, so it's partly my fault.
I do love that idea of confusion as a tactic, though. I think I love the thought of that fox running around with a bunch of sabs and everyone would just being baffled, and the whole thing's called off. Daniel, you're pretty happy with the emergence of other performers doing what you do?
I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, I think that's the beauty in our movement. Like, we all hopefully understand that, like, none of us is gonna achieve animal liberation by themselves. So yeah, no, I think, like, if we can, that's almost even the test for me. Like, if something is worth pursuing, like, does it have the potential to benefit and to multiply? And yes, so everybody who is into becoming a drag animal part of the family, do it and reach out. And yeah, it can be other cows, anything. That would be hilarious and fantastic, of course.
Yeah, I've got a question here from the crowd that I'm just going to throw in, because I was going to keep it till the end, but I think this one's pertinent for now. If each of you had to choose a drag animal, what would it be?
I mean, I'll definitely be the fox. Sorry to interrupt. That's
No.
I want to be Foxy Deluxe. That's what I want to be.
It writes itself.
Well, I was just going to say, I think what Daniel's done is really clever and important, because obviously the dairy industry is just so horrific and such it's interwoven so crazily into our society and into the products we buy and the food that we buy from the supermarkets. And obviously with the it's kind of at the moment in the past year I've felt very passionately about being topless and desexualizing, if that's the word, female breasts, because there's absolutely no difference aside from we give life to babies. There's no difference at all, and I think it's how they are sexualized is one of our downfalls as a society. And I think the way he's chosen to be Sawyer the cow, I think it's quite important for that movement as well, because obviously oppression on women is very heavily linked to the dairy industry and to us taking the milk meant for babies, and sexualizing breasts, and as I think Ben, did you say about the advert being quite sexualized? It's all interwoven, and so yeah, I don't really have a drag animal myself, but I just want to give props to Daniel for picking Sawyer the cow, because I think it's on many levels it's brilliant.
No, it's interesting as well. I know Dan, you touched on this earlier, but in the bringing intersectionality into your work, and how you've seen intersectionality come into the movement over the past few years as well. I think it's been quite a turning point over the past few years for people seeing a broadening of the perspective of people within animal rights and the work we do in the context of kind of the broader social justice movement. Do you feel a bit of responsibility with the work you do around that, around a responsibility beyond the animal rights movement?
I mean, from my side, I'm a queer man. I definitely feel like that's also my community, and I'm also like, I've been inspired and mentored, and like who I am is thanks to the women in my life, I would say. So I also feel very aligned with like the feminist movement and other social justice movements as well. Like there's so many of them, and they all are about like validating some forms of life more than others. And I think it's not only our responsibility as animal rights activists to think along these other issues, because if we stand for liberation, we have to liberate all animals, including the humans. But also it's such an interesting place to engage in conversations. I know it from my community. Let's say if I'm in the queer community, and people have these slogans like "born this way," or like the slogans, the ways of thinking, you just have to open it a little bit, and then we are in the middle of animal rights. And I think by showing that we support other movements, we also can create alliances, and I think it's absolutely central, and it deeply moves me. I mean, I'm very concerned with what humans experience as well. So
there's something really interesting in there, isn't there, about a perspective beyond our own work, about the broader strategic aims or where we're going as a movement. And thinking about the strategic side of things, Harley, I'd just like to come to you, because your work really puts you at the heart of strategic development within the animal and climate justice movement. And thinking about performance itself and the work you do, how do you think performance can best be used as a strategy within the movement? How can it be used to further those broader strategic aims?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like that's a good question, a big question. And I definitely feel like, I think it's like something Daniel said earlier, is that, no one can achieve animal liberation on their own. But I think even like to broaden that out, it's like, we don't know how we're going to achieve animal liberation. Like, we've never done it before. So I think like that's very much my approach to strategy. And I actually, one of the more recent kind of ideas that I've been kind of developing, I talked about at a symposium recently, which it's been in my head for a long time, which was exploring how, the cultural and creative industries and like social movements are very much the kind of the same kind of system. And a big part of that is this defining principle of that nobody knows what's going to be successful until it is. Like, you can have all the available information before you write a piece of music or, make a movie or create a piece of art. You can know what's worked before, what's worked in the past, what hasn't worked. But really, kind of when you create a piece of art and then put it out into the world, you don't know, you can't, you don't have that like ironclad, yes, this is going to resonate with people and this isn't. And sometimes it can be really surprising. I think it's really similar with social change, in that we can have all the knowledge about past social movements, what's worked, what hasn't, what strategies have led to where. But when we kind of try and create cultural intervention through like social movement organizing, we don't know what's going to spark that like cultural resonance and what's just going to disappear. And we've seen that with social movements. We've seen these moments, and like in social movement literature, they're sometimes called like moments of the whirlwind, where just everything blows up and suddenly there's so much energy around a topic. And those triggers for those moments are so hard to predict. So I definitely think the more people doing different things, and kind of like building a movement which is supportive of different ways and different approaches, because I feel like there can be, and in my experience with the movement, there can be this kind of very, I guess, fixation on finding the right thing of like, this tactic is what we should be doing and anyone who's doing anything else is wrong. And we spend so much time and energy trying to convince each other why we should be doing the same thing, that I feel like we lose this opportunity for this like really like, I guess, this like flourishing of different things happening, and not knowing what's going to happen and what's going to build on what. So I definitely see performance as being part of that, I guess, of that there's like, performance is flourishing. It's ideas transforming into images and words and movement. And it's, in a lot of ways, just like that pure creative energy being projected out there and then impacting people. So I think like performance is an opportunity to kind of just test ideas as well. And I think that conversation earlier about like, collaboration and, using other people's work and things like that, I feel like that's so important to me, because so a lot of the work that I've done has been on messaging, of trying to kind of, find the right words, trying to find the 3-word slogan that's going to capture a whole idea, trying to figure out the story that we're trying to tell and how to communicate that. And, the ultimate goal with a message is that someone's going to pass it on. Like, you're trying to create a meme, essentially. You're trying to create this endlessly repetitive idea that just kind of gets spread and loses any sense of ownership. Of like, I think all of our goals would be that our work or our ideas just are out in the universe and no one's remembering, oh yeah, that's that thing that Daniel did or Daniel said. Like, it's like, no, this has just become so ingrained in our world that it loses that sense of origin. So I see performance and art as being this like breeding ground of ideas where we can test what's going to work, what's going to strike this like cultural resonance for people, what's going to inspire other people's creativity. Like, I think the ultimate kind of like achievement of our goals, like I think of this with like actions as well. Like I know with like McDonald's stuff that we did in the UK, it was so fantastic to see, we'd do a big disruptive action, would use certain imagery, certain words, and then to see that repeated around the world, like people using the same imagery, the same words. And for me, that's like the ultimate sign of success, of that people have taken this idea and it's done something to them, and then they've transformed it and they've spread it and shared it. So yeah, I think performance is just this big, like, yeah, petri dish of ideas, and ultimately trying to strike upon that those certain things that are going to then spread.
It's interesting thinking about the spread within the movement, but then the spread beyond the movement as well, and how people who aren't on our side or in the movement yet feel about what we do. And I'm thinking of Dan here, and the way that your projects in particular, you know, they question social norms, power relations across a range of fields: sexuality, human, animal rights. How do you think performance activism can influence public perception of the movement? And kind of what responsibility do we have as activists to be conscious of how we're affecting that public perception?
Yeah, so I think there's just a huge difference of where we're seen and by whom, or who is addressed. And I think that's maybe also something that in the animal rights movement, we are sometimes a bit confused by. Like, do we create and share content for convinced vegans? Do we share it? Do we hope that, I don't know, we have an Instagram channel with lots of slaughterhouse footage, like that we understand like who is actually watching that and what we want to achieve with this? I think it's a very thin line in a world where we all battle for attention. I think like these more disruptive actions of activists on the streets or in front of a restaurant, I think they have a very different effect than, let's say, work which is maybe for the animals directly, or work which is for the activists, or work which is more just a necessity as self-expression or of healing. And I think all of us know these different aspects because we perform in different situations. For me, my strategy is in the way that I want something which is joyful. I loved what Harley said about being irresistible. That really resonated to me, in the sense that, like, if we are as a movement full of like aggressivity and violence, it's not inviting. It's not. But I understand that some people have to have this role as well. I don't want to deny it. I think there again we need the multitude. Did I answer the question? That's a good one. Somebody else?
Yeah, it's interesting getting everyone's perspectives on this, because you're all variously performing, you know, to a public, and you're all coming from a very different angle artistically. So I'm thinking of Barbara and you know, Jen here coming in as they are as musical artists. To what extent do you feel any sort of pressure to reach out beyond activists to the general public? I mean, to what extent is public validation beyond the movement important to your work?
Yeah, just it's really interesting. I'm thinking there's so many spokes to the wheel, there really are. And at the end of the day, I think you just have to be genuine. You have to be yourself, and nothing fires other people up as much, I think, when they can see that somebody is shining their own light, is being themselves, and that is a very attractive thing. You know, even if a member of the public doesn't necessarily agree with what you're saying, and they can see you're genuine, you have passion and belief, and there's nothing false about it. It's coming from a pure place. You know, they can respect that, and they can hear you, I feel. You know, so, and as I say, there's many spokes to the wheel. Some people might say, well, I'm not going to listen because you're not saying it the way I want to hear it. But that's okay. It'll reach somebody else, you know, and as long as it sparks a little seed, a reaction, that's the main thing. But yeah, I think coming back to that saying of being the change you want to see in the world, and being passionate and being yourself, is the best way to get any message across, because you can't be anybody else, and you can't be everything. You know, we can always be just part of a little spoke on a wheel and be a genuine part. That's all that matters, and that's going to reach. It's not about you know, sort of ticking boxes and saying, yeah, I've reached these amount of people. It's just allowing yourself to be, and hoping that you'll be an inspiration along the way to make the world a better place. And it's all for the animals, and it's all about the animals, and that's a way of getting something positive from what we're doing, is to think that who you're doing it for, you know, and hoping that you're going to make a positive difference to the world by sort of sharing your message, shining your light.
Jen, what responsibility do you feel to the public beyond the animal rights world?
Yeah, I think Barbara said pretty much everything, but I would just extend that and just say, if you're living it in your truth and you're sharing your passion, you can't go wrong. There's nothing you can do wrong. If you're living true to yourself, and moving with the right intentions, that's all you can do. And that's your only job. It isn't your job to change anybody's mind. You know, that's out of your control, but you just need to be true to yourself, and yeah, just live in that, and live it and breathe it.
This is all getting very inspirational. Go on, Ben.
Yeah, just to echo those those 2 points, in the sense of, I was talking to Daniel about this the other day. I was having one of my many rants, and there's very much a case of, for me personally, I don't know how you guys feel, of it's such a desperate situation that you want to do everything, and you're both right, Bob and Jen, in the sense of you do what you're good at because that's how you stay sane, but it's also that's how you contribute to the movement. You can't do everything. And I think there is a tendency for activists to want to do everything, and I've definitely felt that a lot, of just because, first off, who else is going to do it? Which a lot of people will do it. It's just we get so wound up, but also it's such a desperate situation. But yeah, I think that's a really good point to knuckle down on, is a sense of doing what you're good at and what you love and passionate about, and it will stick, because it won't stick otherwise. If you're just doing something, if I'm doing something that's just not aligned with what I'm passionate about wholly, it's just not going to stick. It's just going to be half a job.
And Ben, you're carving out a very specific kind of academic, very research oriented niche for yourself, and kind of looking, you know, we were looking outwards at public perception there, thinking about kind of turning inwards now and looking at ourselves and the work we do. What assumptions or biases do performative activists need to be conscious of? What do they need to recognize and work with in order to be effective, to achieve what they want to do?
Yeah, the big what's it called again when you stand on a box and speak? What's it called again? My soapbox. Yeah, my soapbox is that performers need to recognize their power in the movement, and the movement needs to harness that. Again, it's me being slightly bitter in the sense of I'm not making those websites I said I should do, but I believe there should be more of a closer, and Harley said it, this kind of closer kind of intertwining of understanding that activism is performance, but also understanding that performance is a strategic tool as a performer or as a creative as well. I think there's a lot of creative stuff happening. Yeah, biases, assumptions and biases. I'm not sure really. I think it is just recognizing what you want to explore as a creative, and keep exploring that. And as was been mentioned before, is this mistakes equals movement. So it's okay, we're making mistakes, and it's all coming from a good place. I think there's an interesting space in the sense of that we feel that there's a definitely impending thing of we don't have enough time. So from a personal point of view, is this, I don't know how you guys feel, but before I was an activist, I always was a perfectionist, and I still got that in my head a bit, but it needs to be polished, it needs to be done and ready. But as an activist, you can't do that. You can't afford to polish and try and polish and try and polish and try. So there's an interesting thing there of fighting against, desperate to get the work out there so it can be memeable, as Harley said, or it can catch, but also doing it well enough for it to be memeable. So there's a fine balance there as well. I'm a perfect example of, you can think too much about it and it just doesn't work. or you can think not enough about it and it won't work. So yeah, I think it's being aware of that, aware of your own practice, your own process. And I think that's a big thing of my research, in the sense of being aware of your process as much as the output you have, but looking at the process of creating is really important. Does that make a bit of sense to the
Yeah, I
question?
mean, you really touched on, what Harley was talking about earlier with there's a lot in there around this permission to fail, and just getting stuff out there, and just we all learn from it. There's no such thing as a failed test, there's only knowledge that we gain from the testing. And Harley, thinking about the work you do, sort of coming off of Ben's point there, I mean, from your perspective, strategically, what challenges do performative activists face doing this work that need to be solved?
Yes, good one. Just to go back quickly on the idea of failure as well. I remember I was working on something which is this the thing I was talking about earlier about like cultural change and social change being really linked. And I'd written something which was a kind of an idea that comes from like cultural and creative theory, which was that like a small number of hits. There's kind of like a small number of hits comes out of like this massive like number of flops, of like you end up with a huge number of flops and a very small number of hits. And I was kind of writing something about that, and a friend was reading my ideas and kind of like suggested a rephrasing of, rather than thinking about it of like, it's just such a tiny number of successes put against a massive number of failures, of kind of rephrasing it and like rephrasing it in my mind as well, of it being a large number of failures are needed in order to find that small number of successes. And I feel like that really like shifted the way I thought about things. It was such a small kind of suggestion, but it really kind of like flipped things for me, of rather than seeing failures as being exactly that, like not striking upon the right thing, doing something wrong, rather than seeing it as like that, instead seeing it as like, well, this is what is needed in order to eventually get the thing that's going to work. And like definitely when I was working with Animal Rebellion, and when I've been working with any group, there is just a massive amount of things that just don't work. Like we did so many things which never even ended up happening because of whatever reasons, months of planning and then just nothing, or kind of things that happened and then fell flat or completely flopped or got backlash. And it's kind of like a big, I know in the work that I've done, I've talked about needing artistic leadership in social movements, both because we need people who can think creatively and build creative kind of constructs, but also because like so much of activism is resilience, and no one has more resilience than artists in so many ways. Like I feel like we're just used to living in this kind of uncertain, unsure landscape where you can put months or years of unpaid labor into something and then just see it flop completely, and then the next day be back at it building the next thing. So I think I've kind of forgotten the question, but I think I've answered a different question. So I definitely think that kind of like resilience and that commitment to going back and trying again is incredibly critical to social change, and it's something that is just it's kind of like it's a part of being an artist as well. So I feel like that's like, it's a very transferable skill, and the more artists we have in social movements, the more people, because you get a banker in a social movement, and I've seen this happen, people coming from corporate backgrounds, and some of them are fantastic, some of them are completely amazing, but some of them just can't deal with the uncertainty of this thing of being like, but we work so hard, and it's like, and now we just got to scrap all that and move on to the next thing. So I think that's a really powerful kind of tool that we have in our toolbox to be able to apply to the movements that we're building.
It's interesting, isn't it, that idea of resilience it just feels so important to activists generally, but particularly people who are coming from an artistic performance perspective. You know, it's one thing to be standing on the street talking to people about veganism or holding a banner. It's another to be putting yourself out there artistically and exposing yourself like that. What does everyone else feel about that idea of resilience? Does that resonate with your own work? Jen, how does that resonate with you and your creative output? Is resilience important to you?
I mean, as I was saying before, you just gotta move and create and be and move with the right intentions. And it's no, I just don't. I feel that if you do that, it doesn't. For me personally, and I've had all the conversations that everyone has with non-vegans and people who are trying to, make themselves feel better by putting us down. And I've realized, nothing can affect me anymore. No one can, because it's not even, I don't even think about it. I'm just being true to myself and just using the gifts that I've been given to try and make this world a better place. So people can say literally whatever they want. And it doesn't, I don't mind. And I realize that, as I say now, a lot of the time when people are attacking you, it's because of their own insecurities or their own guilt. So it's trying to work with that and try and, make it a positive experience for them, so that you can actually try and help them through this, guilt that we all experience. It's just as vegans, we're actually now trying to do something about it.
Barbara, I've seen you enthusiastically nodding there. Does that resonate with you too? That idea of just getting on with it, speaking your truth, let the haters be damned.
Oh yeah, I mean, I agree with what Jen said. I mean, because we all evolve, we all change, we all grow. But and I think once you realize that, this is my truth and it's right, and you know it, you're living it, then you have that resilience, and you're not so much dragged down by what other people are saying, and if they're disagreeing with you, that's okay. If they want to say the sky is yellow, that's fine, that's okay. That's your perspective. But once you're sure of your own truth and you just live in that, then it helps with that resilience, definitely. But I think it's a process to get there, and it's you look back and you see what a rocky road it's been to reach that point, to know that this is my truth and it's okay, and I'm living it. And if you're ready to hear it, that's good, because the more people that do it for the animals, it's great. The world's going to be a better place. But if you're not ready to hear it, I remember Joey Carvstrong saying that you could just be like that tiny percent of somebody's 100% change. You're not going to do it all in one conversation, but we've all, if you think where we've all come from, I was brought up, sort of eating animals and not thinking about it, and it's been a long process, to get where I am today. So I think we have to not forget that it's been a huge learning curve, that we've evolved, and that everybody is capable of that, and it's just getting that message out there in whatever way you can, so it can be heard. And the more genuine way you express that message, the more likely it is to be heard.
Yeah, it's a real embrace of process, isn't it? And Ben, you mentioned earlier that idea of really getting to grips with the process being the thing almost, rather than the end result. How does this resonate with your work in terms of resilience?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think, again, going back to my process in the sense of, the more I've done this research, the more I realize that my practice and a lot of people's practice, and I can definitely resonate with Barbara and Jen's, is this kind of moving within, this kind of using my art to explore my own experiences, and kind of, and that's how the message will come across, because of exploring my own experience, exploring my own trauma. And going back to what Barbara said at the very beginning, Jen's also mentioned it, of this kind of this creative output being a form of healing and a form of of an empowerment, and it kind of keeps you sane. And I think that's a really interesting strategical point as well, in the sense of so many activists suffer burnout, and whether that's a case of, is it because we haven't found our, well, obviously I've suffered burnout for sure, in the sense of it feels hopeless a lot of the time, and there's so much trauma, and we're living in that, and we're submerged in that constantly. Every day we're reminded, it's the back of our heads all the time. But is it the case that of this kind of creative process or a passion process, that we are coping with it and building resilience because we have this form of outlet? I'm not saying we're creative, so we're better than everyone else. I don't mean that. I mean, creativity is a perfect mirror for that. I mean, there'll be people who bake amazing cakes that is another creative outlet, or great speakers, or video editors, and they're finding this output to stay sane and stay resilient, and recognizing that as a strategy in our own activism is really interesting, and really something that I'm interested in. Again, it's about process, looking at our process and how is it helping us, and how can we tweak it to make us even more effective and more resilient as well.
Yeah, I think there's something in there, isn't there, about that inward focus on making ourselves better, more resilient, more open to failing and learning, that can help us break through more with the public, that can make us more effective as activists. And I'm thinking particularly about I was really thinking about the idea of breaking through there, and thinking about Dan's work in particular, which from the outside looking in for many people is quite transgressive and provocative. And I think, what boundaries and taboos can performance and animal rights be used to explode or break through? What are the frontiers that we can break through here with performance?
So for me, I think one really important boundary, and I think we have mentioned it many times, is this one between art and activism, or also maybe activism and entertainment, that we manage through creative ways of doing what we want to do. We manage to kind of get into spaces where otherwise we wouldn't exist, where nobody speaks about animal rights, basically. And I think that's something I think we can become even much better, that we really find ways to be heard in from parliament to big newspapers to the board of a big bank. I don't know, like that we learn how to creatively make ourselves heard in spaces where otherwise we don't exist. And another element for me would be to find a way to be confrontational, but like in a maybe compassionate way or something like this. And that's something I've been struggling, and I'm still struggling a lot, like this. Do I want to have this discussion again, or should I say something? Should I not say something? And I think the performativity of these, also all these conversations we lead in our families, our teams, with our friends, with our collaborators, if we learn to do this more lightheartedly and more efficiently, that I think we can just be better activists and more lighthearted human beings. So I think there's a lot to in my own practice also I've been learning, because I was in such a despair space and Soya was kind of my outlet to have a positive vision, to be optimistic, when I was actually just like, I just read another book about, I don't know, fishing industries, and I don't want to leave my bed. And how can we lift each other up and grant ourselves beingness, that we are allowed to just be animals on this planet as well.
That's fantastic. It really ties back, I think, to what Barbara and Jen were saying earlier about being ourselves. And I love that idea as well about confrontational compassion. I think I've not heard that one. It's an interesting approach, because I think a lot of it is just confrontation. So to bring that compassion and not lose it as well when we're engaging with people, I think is really important. Beyond where you're all at now, what's the next stage for you all creatively? Where do you want to go next from where you are now?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like this is a hard question for me to answer because I never seem to be able to know what I'm going to be doing in the future. So since I've come back, so I got back to Australia in May, which was a very interesting transition, to go from working full-time for Animal Rebellion, so just immersed in that, to then kind of move countries. I started studying, so I'm doing my master's at the moment, and then in typical me fashion kind of dove into working with a whole bunch of different groups here, and then over time, well, over a few months that I've been, several months that I've been back, kind of taken on too much and then started paring back to what I actually want to be doing, but it's in a completely different direction to anything that I've done before. Always focused on animal justice, of course, but just like not what I imagine myself doing. So I see, I guess in the future, I see myself always kind of bringing in the elements of performance, and I do hope to start, I guess, bringing what I learned from the UK about creating these like disruptive, colorful, visual actions back home. But I see finding new ways of telling stories, and of trying to tell the stories of animals. So in Australia, it's a very different movement to the movement that I was used to in the UK. There's a lot of, commonalities, but there's, I guess, the history of animal rights in Australia is kind of a bit different, and it comes from a different place, and it's very grounded. The core of animal rights here is very much based on exposing injustice in a very kind of like visual sense. Like a lot of the movement here is very based in investigative work. A lot of it's based in, the kind of early work of animal liberation, doing open rescues, and then the kind of later work of groups, kind of going in and then using footage to kind of show the realities of farming, and then trying to create cultural shift that way. And I think that's been really powerful, but I feel like we're starting to hit this wall with people just switch off when they see graphic imagery, because they've seen it before, or they are just kind of numb to everything in the world. So I think like the biggest question for me at the moment, and the thing that I think I'm trying to explore in my work, is how do we find creative ways of telling the stories of animals who are caught in the system. And I think the work that Daniel does, the work that Ben does. I'm not as familiar with the work of Barbara and Jen, but I will be definitely looking both of you up after this, so I'm looking forward to that. But I think that way of using our tools as activists, to create pathways into the lives of other animals, I think is really powerful. So I think that's definitely probably on the cards for me, of trying to figure that out, in the context of Australian animal rights, and trying to also, I guess, get better. Something I've been wanting to do for a while is get better at building more like long-term campaigns, that extend on from these big, bold, flashy actions, that then actually like expand that out into, well, what is the goal here? What are we trying to kind of shift? And then if that doesn't work, how can we try another angle? So
yeah, sound like you've got your hands full. Barbara, what's your next creative frontier?
Keep doing what I do and do it well, and evolve in that way. But for me, I feel it's helping people to see each animal as an individual rather than a mass of animals, that each animal has one precious life and is one individual. If you think of the power that the turtle with a plastic straw up the nose, that the effect that had on banning plastic straws, sort of everybody was like, oh no, we don't like that poor turtle, we'll ban the plastic straws. And I think it's like helping, I would like to help people to recogniise that animals are all individuals. They all have their each has their own personality, each has one precious life. Just evolve organically as I can, do what I can, be supportive to other activists that I'm involved with, or that I don't know, and try and be with my tribe, to sort of give me strength and to offer strength to other people. To just be part of the animal rights movement, to know that this is to focus and evolve and just sort of keep on sharing the story, keep on doing what I do best, in whatever way I can, really, and be the best I can.
Jen, where are you going next?
So the album I released a few months ago, it started off as an animal rights album, and then over the last couple of years it's transitioned from an animal rights album into an animal rights and human rights album, because we are all one, and humans are not going to be free until the animals are free. And I've realised that my job here is to, or part of it anyway, is to empower the people, because the reason that we hurt animals and eat animals is because we've been lied to. We've been completely disempowered, and society are getting more and more unhealthy, more and more unhappy, and happy people don't hurt other people, and happy people don't hurt animals. And I believe that innately we do not want to hurt animals. We don't want to take a life away, especially when it's so unnecessary. So I'm now moving forward, trying to make people happy, give them back their power that they've been stripped from them from the day that we're born. We're lied to, and we're put into these little boxes. And I feel passionately about sharing that truth and helping people get out of it. And my songs are moving forward into more uplifting songs, and songs that you can move to, you can dance to, because that supports the health side of things. And physically moving, as I said before, it really helps you mentally. So if you're moving, you're going to be feeling better, and that then vibrates out to the rest of the world. The more happiness we can bring in to the world, then that's just going to help the animals, human animals, but our animal brothers and sisters as well.
More gorgeous positivity there. Thanks, Jen. Dan, what's next, and where do we go? What's next for Sawyer? What's next beyond Sawyer? Where are you headed?
Yeah, so Sawyer has quite some nice projects coming up. So I'm very happy with that. I feel like after the COVID kind of time, a lot of seeds that have been planted and waiting for a long time, they're kind of starting to blossom. My curiosity with Sawyer would be to bring her somehow to TV. I'm working on that. I think she would work really well as a TV character, just in the idea of reaching more audience and reaching like a completely random audience. So I think that would be something I'm really interested in. But I'm from Switzerland, so it's a bit different. We don't have the BBC. And then I also work at the moment on a project which is a bit complementary. I was just realizing my network is very good in the Swiss art world. So rather than just doing art in this context, I now try to get the whole art scene in Zurich, my hometown, but also beyond in Switzerland, to go plant-based. Because if they want to do more than just like greenwashing talk, and take sustainability goals seriously, that's like a logical step. So my vision would be to kind of, hopefully create a new normal within the art field, and that like this, it's kind of beaming outwards to other realms of society.
I live for the day when Sawyer has a primetime TV show. we'll know we've made great strides. Ben, I'd like to know where your creative practice is going, but also as the originator of tonight's session and the founder of Bright Eyes Theatre Arts. Beyond your own work, what do you think the future is for performance in the animal rights movement, and kind of what's your biggest hope?
Yeah, I think my biggest hope is, like I said before, about the realization that performance has this power beyond just an add-on or just a thing we do as like supporting the movement. I feel so passionately that it's intrinsically interwoven, whether we like it or not. Like, I always go back to this thing of, if we go outside a slaughterhouse and do a vigil, that is a performance. And yes, and I think the bridge we've got to get over there with activists not thinking like that is it doesn't make it less real. Just because it's in a song doesn't make it less real. Just because it's a theatre production doesn't make it less real. It brings out something. It distills it into something that we can consume, not in a capitalist way, but in a emotive way, in a tangible way. And I've just written down here, and I think it's kind of connected, but this in creative practice, we're dealing with beauty, whether that's like the beauty in trauma, if you get what I mean. I mean, we find awful, sad songs beautiful in a weird way, don't we? But we also find beauty in utopian images and stuff. And I think recognizing that as well, how we're molding this beauty and bringing that to life, and I think that's really important. And I think just going back to what's next is a sense of continuing that research I'm doing, hopefully, touch wood, finishing my PhD on time, but then continuing that research and stuff. And the creation of Bright Eyes Theatre Arts, you give me much more credit than it's due. I basically just put on a website, and then I invited Daniel to do Soy the Cow. But this idea, this grand notion of this space of artists, encouraging artists and giving artists the space to be able to concentrate on non-human animals, is really exciting to me. Nurturing that and growing that side of stuff. I think it's really interesting and really exciting if we can contribute to changing the cultural narrative around animals. And I think that's how change happens, when people start feeling differently about animals because they're hearing stories about them through the presentation of beauty by creatives. So hopefully some of that made sense.
It did, Ben, and I'm not going to allow you to talk yourself down, because I think we've had a lot of positivity in here tonight, and there's plenty of people outside of this room are going to talk us down, so let's not do it to ourselves. So, Ben, I know you've done amazing work, and I know you're going to continue to do it, so stop it. Do you know what? We are rapidly approaching the end of this. Now, we've actually just got lots of nice comments rather than questions, so what I want to do is I want to make sure that people can find you and follow you and get in touch with you beyond this. So I'm just going to go around the screen in the order that I can see you, and just ask you to tell anybody who's listening now or will be watching this later where they can find you. So Instagram handles, Spotify, whatever it may be. Barbara, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm on Facebook, Barbara Helen Vegan Eyes, and I'm also on YouTube, Barbara Helen Vegan Eyes, and I've got a Bandcamp page, Barbara Helen, where all my music is there, and you can also listen to me on Spotify and on Apple Tunes and things like that, Apple Music, and sort of just. I think they're my platforms, really. I'm just getting to grips with Instagram, so I haven't quite got there yet. Most of my stuff's on Facebook, and music's out there.
And did festivals across?
Oh yeah,
well?
sort of. It's mainly through the summer I've been doing things, but yeah, I'm available to sort of do festivals. And a couple of weeks ago, I was at the plant-based treat event in Newcastle, just performing live outside, and just get out there and do what I can when I can. So yeah, available.
Vegan Queen V, where can we find you?
Vegan Queen V on YouTube. My album is on Bandcamp. It's called Freedom Warrior, so you can find it on there. Yeah, YouTube, I've got a few singles from the album up on YouTube, and I have a website which is veganqueenv.com, and yeah, Instagram veganqueenv on there. I got kicked off Facebook, so you won't find me there.
It's a badge of honor these days, I think.
Think so.
Harley, what about you? How can people get in touch with you? How can people get involved with Animal Rebellion? All of that.
Yeah, well, Animal Rebellion, I'm not too involved with anymore since I moved, but definitely social media for them. I'm always looking for more people in the UK. For me, yeah, I'm on Instagram. I'm not a motorbike, because I'm not. I'll put my details in the chat. I have a Medium blog site as well, where I occasionally write about these kind of ideas, and I should more regularly. And then also, just if people want to kind of chat or anything, I've just put my email in the chat as well. Feel free to reach out. I love to talk to people, love to have conversations about social movement, social change. And then you'll probably, I mean, if we have a successful action at some point in the future, you'll probably see me locked onto something on the news. So fingers crossed with that.
Thanks, Harley. Daniel, so outside of a primetime Saturday night BBC TV slot for Soya the cow, where can people get you?
Well, you find me also on basically all the different social media at Soya the cow, Soya with Y. Also on YouTube, there's some videos of songs, some theater trailers and stuff like this. But yeah, I think the best is Instagram. I share stories of my daily life as a drag cow.
Fantastic. And Ben, where can people get involved with your work, talk to you?
Yeah, I think my best protocol is my website, benhunt.info, because that's got everything on. But also, yeah, on Instagram, Bright Eyes Theatre Arts or Bright Eyes Theatre. It's one of the two. I'll put it in the chat as well.
This is how new it is, eh? You still can't remember the Instagram handle.
Fresh out the box. But yeah, please do get in touch if anyone hears this and wants to collaborate or I'd just love to talk to any creative about their practice on animal rights, because that's what I'm writing about and looking at. So
all right, well, we're going to bring this to a close. Thank you so much for giving over 2 hours of your time, everyone, particularly looking at Harley, who I imagine is going to go to bed immediately after this. All right, well, thanks again, everybody. It's been a pleasure listening to you all, hearing from you, learning about your work. I'm sure you're going to get lots of followers, lots of people getting involved, and I wish you all the best in everything you do. And I hope to see you out there doing work for the animals. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Leigh, for such a thoughtful, really well-structured, lovely, calm and relaxed session. I really appreciate your time.
Pleasure. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.